and then
back to Skype. Okay.
Without further ado, because we are running a bit late, I am going to turn things over to Sherry.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Right now they cannot. One second. Now we can.
Voila. Hello. Good morning, everybody. My apologies for not being there. I am actually a witness or an expert witness in a search engine case. So it was very appropriate that this was my topic today. And what I'm going to talk about is the architecture of searcher behaviors. And just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I am a search engine optimizer, and I am not evil. There are search engine optimizers who are not snake oil salesmen, and I happen to be one of those. And this year I've been doing search engine optimization for 20 years now. And my area of expertise happens to be on searchers and the searcher experience and how you can create your websites and your web documents to make them easy to use as well as easy to find. I have served on the board of directors of the User Experience Professionals Association and the Information Architecture Institute. I am a total search nerd. I actually read and edit articles for publication for a British academic organization. So, in other words, I'm a search nerd. And I'd like to share with you some of the research that I've been doing for the past 20 years and give you some really good guidelines to know for both user experience and findability. So there are a lot of different definitions of user experience, and there's one here from the UXPA. I like Jacob Nielsen. For those of you who don't know who he is a absolutely wonderful website usability guru. And he said, and I love this quote, the first law of e-commerce is that if users can't find the product, they can't buy it, which is something similar that Peter Morville said, people can't use what they can't find. So whenever I talk to people about user experience, I want to know whose definition or whose model they follow. So a lot of people follow Jesse James Garrett's version of the user experience. There's one reason that I reject most definitions, and the reason is the very things I just told you. People can't use what they can't find, and if I don't see findability as a part of the user experience, then I think that it's not 100% what people should do. So I rely on Peter Morville's User Experience Honeycomb, and it's from his book Search Patterns, and it's huge. People can't use what they can't find. So it's not going to be accessible to people if it's not accessible to search engines. And I'm not only talking about web search engines, I'm also talking about site search engines. I'm writing an article for a library science journal right now, and accessibility is a problem even with professional software for search databases. So we need to make findability a priority, not just delight in the user experience. And findability has multiple facets. This is the formal definition from Morville's book, but the way I like to say it is people should be able to find content online via browsing, via searching, and via asking. People are going to browse. They're going to click from web page to web page. And one of the things I point out, so here's Google, and I was doing an informational query right there. But when people want to go to a website, so if they go to Mayo Clinic, and pardon me if you hear my typing, and they want to find flu symptoms. And I want Google to autocorrect that for me, which it did. When people go to Mayo Clinic for flu symptoms, they don't go back, hit the back button, go to Google, do another search for flu medications, click on the Mayo Clinic again, and keep going back. That doesn't happen. Searching and browsing do not occur independently of each other. So when people do querying and searching, they tend to have four main goals: navigational, informational, and transactional. And we're going to go into great details for this. But they are also going to ask their social network. They're going to ask their social network online, and they're going to ask their social network offline. I know that it's hard to believe that some people ask their social networks offline, but it really does happen. I've actually observed it. And what we found is, for those of you who have background in information sciences and librarianship, as I do, is that people constantly change how they search based on the response to the results. For those of you who don't know, I do have, and I'll just go there really quick, I do have a bibliography for you to download, and it is properly formatted for those of you who want to study searcher behaviors. So I will have this and this presentation available to download. But just know that people do all kinds of different things. And it is our job as user experience professionals, and it's our job as information architects, and even my job as a search engine optimizer, to help people find their desired content. And we do this by search engine optimization, search engine advertising for the browsing and the searching, and then we do a lot of this with social media optimization. So these very things in the marketing and the business world are a huge part of the findability process. One of the things I like to point out is that search engine optimization is not optimizing for search engines only. If people believe that search engine optimization is optimizing for search engines only, that's when you're working with somebody who's a spam penalty waiting to happen. A lot of people who are technical SEOs tend to get into trouble with search engines. It's the people that focus on both the user, the people who focus on the user-centered design, as well as the technology-centered design, that tend to get the best results in search engines. By search engines, I usually mean Google, Yahoo, and Bing. What we're concerned with is labeling website content, labeling documents so that the content's easy to find. So we want to make sure that our graphic images, our multimedia files, our text-based documents, that includes HTML pages as well as PDFs, have appropriate document labels, navigation labels, and content labels. Not only so humans can interpret those labels, but also technology, and that includes search engines as well as devices. We want to organize content so that it's easy to find. So taxonomy is very, very important to us. And one of the things we try to avoid is siloing content, because siloing content actually makes it more difficult to find. We want to ensure that search engines have access to desired content, and we want to ensure that search engines don't have access to undesirable content. That might sound strange to some people, but there is some content that search engines want to filter out. One example would be duplicate content. Search engines see things such as faceted classification. Faceted classification leads to duplicate content delivery, personalization, and also when you distribute articles. For example, if you publish and you distribute articles on multiple channels, search engines want to filter those search results out because it's not good for the searcher experience. So we work very hard as optimizers to make sure that search engines don't have access to that content. We're not only worried about Google, we're also worried about site search engines. We want to make sure that the site search engine is as accurate as possible. And believe it or not, some of the things that we do for Google actually makes a site search engine more accurate. So your navigation labels, your content labels, and your document labels will make your site search results more accurate. So here's an example from Mayo Clinic, and I use Mayo Clinic as an example in a lot of my presentations because it is extremely well architected, but it's not perfect. So here is their site search engine, and here is a list of search results. Now, the first thing I noticed about this is that it was rather difficult to read. And if people find that your site search engine is difficult to read, they're not going to use it. But here's another thing. What if you had a typo, which is very, very common in search engines? They get a page not found. Now, this is a what not to do, but they did have did you mean up here. So that's a what to do. This would have been a better searcher experience had they produced more results that were close to this. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to avoid this kind of item. We want to accommodate searcher goals because it is such a big part of the user experience. And back in 2012, Pew Internet determined that people use web search engines almost as much as they use email. It's pretty much neck and neck right now. And one of the things that I find amazing about search optimization and having an architecture of web search is that it's a known ranking factor. So pages and documents actually rank based on what people type in search engines. So let's say I want to find the hours for the Tower of London. It's one of the places I like to go. Google actually produces these results. This is called the knowledge graph. And they also put it right here. If I'm looking for pictures of the Tower of London, Google returns images. And if I'm looking for videos, Google tries to return videos. So a lot of people don't realize that search engines actually rank pages based on searcher behaviors. Nobody knows what Google's algorithm is. Nobody knows what Bing's algorithm is. As much as people like to claim they do, they don't. But you can figure out how to accommodate searcher behaviors. And there's even something online. This is actually a copy of Google's search quality rating guidelines. And you can see what they recommend for your own website. So it's really important for people to understand what people want. And what we're trying to figure out is giving the people the ability to teleport. And that's defined as when a person wants to go directly to an information target. And I fully admit that I am a Star Trek fan. Spock is my favorite fictional character. Beam me up, Scotty. I used to watch this with my dad. He's a Star Trek fan. And so it's no wonder that a person like me is heavily involved in web search. So a lot of people, like I said, don't know that taxonomy of web search has existed since the 1990s, and that documents have been ranked and labeled based on that information. So the main searcher goals to know are go, know, and do. This is how Google describes it. In navigational queries, when a person wants to go to a specific website or a specific page within a website. It is a very, very common type of search engine query. And in fact, one of my colleagues at Bing told me that up to 33% of web search queries are navigational in nature. The second type is called an informational query. And this is where a query where a person wants to know more about a specific topic. It is the most common type of search engine query. It's the most common type of search engine query on mobile devices as well as desktop devices. And every website, I believe, should have pages and page types that should accommodate informational goals. The last type is the least common type of search engine query, and that's a transactional query where somebody wants to do some kind of web activity. And for those of you who want to know more about this, this article, A Taxonomy of Web Search by Andre Broder, was published before 2002, but that is the citation that I will give you, and you can easily find this if you go to Google Scholar. It's wonderful. So this is what we need to remember. Where can I go? What can I know? What can I do? And every website, every web document should accommodate these type of search engine queries. So navigational intent has a lot to do with finding and discovering, as well as refinding. And I will show you an example of refinding very, very shortly. So one of the things I like to do when I'm doing research for different query types is I look at my web analytics data. And any of you that have really good web analytics data might notice that over time, you'll see that there's an increase of people coming to your home page, and they're doing all or part of their URLs. And that is an indication of increased brand recognition, increased organization recognition, because all or parts of the URL are in there. A lot of navigational keywords are one or two. So if you were flying United or United Airlines is known as a navigational query. And anytime you see a .gov, a .com, a .edu inside of a search query, usually means that it's navigational in nature. So there are things that you will see to show that a search engine has determined that the searcher intent is a navigational query. And that is the appearance of these things. They're called site links, and I believe that Bing sometimes calls these web links. We can also see this if we do United. So United Airlines, we see this up at the top. But if we go to google.co.uk, and then we do the same query, United, we're going to get very different search results. Because now we have the official Manchester United site. So Google is going to tailor navigational queries based on the user. And over time, we want that to happen. We want the navigational queries on our website to be wonderfully, wonderfully accurate. So this is an example, Sears, one word, Sears.com, that has the domain extension, the TLD. Beyonce's homepage, the word homepage is an indication, whether it's one word or two words, of navigational intent. If somebody types in an abbreviation, so NIMH, National Institution of Mental Health. Site finding is a type of navigational query. It's similar to a known item search because the searcher is looking for a particular website, but the person has already visited the site previously. So when we're looking at these, so let's just do Beyonce homepage. This is probably the right one. And just so you know, this is true on both mobile search as well as desktop search, is that with navigational queries, people rarely look back past positions 1, 2, or 3. And because of that, in fact, people will tend to type in a new keyword phrase up here. So this is where Google and Yahoo and Bing work very, very hard to get these right. So if you see that your site has these site links and your site is appearing up at the top for your company name or your brand, that is a very good sign. It means that you are communicating aboutness to humans as well as technology. So if I wanted to go to the official Star Trek site, There we go. And then underneath this are things that accommodate informational queries. A named page search is a search where a person wishes to go to a specific page within a website. So if a person wants to go to MedicineNet and look for the symptoms of diabetes, or WebMD, symptoms diabetes, WebMD, this is an example of a navigational query. When a person has navigational intent, they're looking at two specific places on a search listing. They're looking at the page title and they're looking at the URL structure, because that will help them best identify what they need. Sometimes search engines don't show the URL structure. Sometimes they will show breadcrumb links. So this is in that place where your taxonomy and your sense of place indicators need to be dead on, because these can appear in search listings. For those of you who don't code web pages, the HTML title tag appears here. This is in Firefox, and this is the URL structure. So one of the things I like to do to determine if the URL structure is a really good one is I will show the URL structure, just the URL and a blank screen, and I ask people, what content do you believe is going to appear when you see this? And if people can reasonably describe what they expect to see, then I know that this document label is a very, very good one. So title tag guidelines for navigational query. One of the things to know is that a title tag should be unique. It should not be the pure repetition of a page heading. It should not be the repetition of breadcrumb links in the reverse order. We like to begin our titles with our most important keyword phrase, and we call this front loading, because people here in the United States read left to right. My master's degree is in Asian Studies Japanese, and people read very differently in Japan than they do in the United States. Most search engines display between 40 to 69 characters. I try to stay in the 40 to 60 range. But the one thing to understand about titles is that variation is normal. I wouldn't expect that the title to a privacy policy on a website is going to say much more than privacy policy in the name of the organization. But if it's a category page, if it's a customer support page, if it's a content page, I would definitely want to have that more descriptive. Just know that there will be natural variation. If the title tag is too long, then the search engine will probably change it. And this is one of the reasons that we need to begin our title tags with our most important words. The other thing to do is, if your organization is known by abbreviations, to include those in your title tags. So the National Institute of Mental Health would do this. I studied human and computer interaction at University of Illinois, and this is the abbreviation for that. Just so you know, search engines, as a general rule, ignore punctuation marks, so don't worry about putting the parentheses sign on this. URL guidelines for navigational queries. You want the shortest URL, search engines want and humans want, the shortest URL possible that describes the content. And we want to use the natural word order. So let's say a website is selling pillowcases, allergy-free pillowcases. We're going to want to use the word order pillowcases and not cases, pillows in the URL structure. Search engines have come out and said use hyphens instead of underscores. And the reason for that is that they're techie geeks at search engines, and an underscore is a character that means something in programming language. Try to keep things all lowercase. Want as few parameters as possible. And the way I explain this to non-technical people is anytime there's a question mark, an ampersand, a percentage sign, or an equal sign, it becomes less likely that a search engine is going to access that content. We try to minimize trailing forward slashes at the end of the URL because this can and does deliver duplicate content to a search engine. So be aware of that. WordPress is notorious for doing that. And also eliminate or minimize stop words. So if the words and, but, or, nor, for are not necessary in an HTML title tag or in a URL, don't use it. And an example I like to use is SEO, Search Your Behavior Quiz. This is something I wrote, and take a look at this. Web Search Your Behavior Quiz, Test Your SEO Knowledge. This is a really good title because it contains both the word quiz and the word test. Notice that there's not all stop words in here, and it's front loaded. So let's look at the full URL. And at the end is the number. So that would be something for those of you who are technical architects to remember, is front loading your title tags and front loading your URL structures will make your content easier to find, not only for technology, but for humans as well. So this is an example of a usability test, an expectancy test that I did for an allergy website. And this, I changed the domain name, but this is an actual URL structure. I asked people, what are you selling? What is this website selling? This is an e-commerce site. And what do you think all the test participants answered? They had no idea. And they give what I like to call the WTF face, where they furrowed brows, and sometimes they actually say it out loud. We want people to understand what we're trying to sell. So as simple as this is, people don't do it. And technology people don't do it. And also you have to be careful about allowing technology to come up with a labeling system, because technology only makes sense to technology. It doesn't necessarily make sense to users. So if there's one thing I could get everybody to do, it would be to go back to their website and revise the URLs and revise their title tags to make it easy for your content to find. The other thing to remember also is that graphic images, videos, and other multimedia files also contain a URL. So if I were to change this URL, this is a URL for a different e-commerce website. The test we gave was, what do you think this content is about? And of course, people said bed bugs and dust mites. And what do you think this is a picture of? Because JPEG indicates this is a picture. And people thought it was bed bug and dust mites. Actually, this is a URL for a pillowcase. So why didn't the user or the people who created this website name their images that pillowcase covers or allergy-free pillowcase covers? Why did they name it bed bug and dust mites? So, and plus these items here aren't very good for users. So really, really look at your URL structure and see if you can revise it to make it easier for technology. So one of the things I do to test for navigational queries is I take the most important pages on a website that I want to show, and I want to make sure that it's appearing at the top of search results. And if Google is not picking up the right page, if Bing is not picking up the right page, that means there's something wrong with the labeling system. There's something wrong with the navigation system. And then the more you can get these items, the titles and the URLs, aligned to what user goals are, you'll find that your site gets more qualified search engine traffic. So informational intent is the most common type of intent on a website. We find that quick facts are more common on mobile queries than they are on desktop queries. But these are all different types of informational intent. Somebody wants to know the meanings of something. What's the definition? A quick fact, as I said, it's very common on mobile devices. People want an answer to a question. What is this such and such's phone number? A lot of times, and this is particularly true in the United States, if a person types in the plural form of a word, they're looking for a list of items. And a list is a type of informational intent. A lot of times that's what's called an ad hoc query or a fishing expedition. And the word review or the word reviews is an indicator that somebody wants to know more about an item or a place that's being reviewed. So knowing that these are common informational queries, what type of content would you put on your website? Well, for a category page tends to be a list, or a subcategory page tends to be a list. So I'm going to optimize the labeling system for the plural version of a word. An answer to a question, frequently asked questions, or FAQ pages are very good places to optimize for question types. So I'm going to put question words on that type of page. I'm going to use the word definition, the word terms. I often find that the word, if I'm including a reference portion of a website, that dictionary is a better label than glossary. So what people are trying to figure out when they're doing an informational query is, what can I learn or what can I know? We typically see, if we look at our web analytics data and our site search engine data, we see these question words. We see 4 or more keywords. And over time, people are typing more and more keywords. And just as a general rule of thumb, let me get back into Google here. One of the reasons that people have problems is that the search field is not wide enough. People will type in more search queries if you have a text entry field that's at least 30 characters in width. The other thing to know is that if you put prompt text in here, so this is what would be considered prompt text. Let's go back if I can get to Google. Notice that Google does not put anything in here where it says search terms. If Google did that, what do you think the most common type of search engine query would be there? Type your keywords here. So for those of you that have a site search engine, make sure you don't have prompt text in there, and make sure you have a character width of at least 30 characters. That will encourage people to search on your website. And then plurals. If you look at web search results, you can tell that keywords are informational by the appearance of things from a knowledge graph. So here's one for Benjamin Franklin. If you type for flu symptoms, you'll tend to see a bulleted list, and that shows informational intent. If you're looking for a definition, you'll tend to see definitions appear. And anytime you see Wikipedia appear, particularly on the first page of results, that is a very, very, very strong indication that those words are informational in nature. So I'm going to type in pictures, Tower of London again. And one of the things I like to do is put the tilde sign in front of a word. Because if you put the tilde sign in front of the word, look at the term highlighting on this page. We also see the word photos. We see the word pictures. We see the word photos, pictures. What these are synonyms. So if you're going to do a labeling system, use the tilde sign to see if you can use synonyms for some of your labels, because you don't want to have exact duplicates of URL structures. So with an ad hoc search, we see this a lot. The searcher's goal is to find as many relevant documents as possible. They're not necessarily looking to go to a specific website. We like to call this a fishing expedition. Example queries, digital cameras. It's such a general query. A person's probably trying to see what kind of search results are going to show based on that, and then they will winnow down. When you see types of, just the word types, T-Y-P-E-S, is an indication of informational intent. The word reviews, again, shows informational intent, and so does the word best, because best usually indicates a list. So these are things to think about as you are creating your labeling system for your documents. A known item search is similar to the ad hoc search, but the searcher knows that it exists in a specific group of documents. Because a known item search has a little bit of navigational intent, what I like to do is make sure the URL structure is easy to type and easy to remember. So here is an example of a known item search that I see quite often, and that is for the word user experience honeycomb. So if I were to change one thing about this item, I would make these underscores hyphens. Now what's important to a web searcher in a search listing is the title. So the title is still important, so all the guidelines I gave you for a title tag are still valid. But the snippet becomes more important for a person to having informational intent. And usually if you see the ... that means that Google or a search engine is getting the snippet content from page to page, not a meta tag description. So when you optimize a page for informational queries, keep in mind that descriptions are usually taken from multiple places. The content, the meta tag description, or sometimes it's taken from an external source. So one of the things I like to do to optimize for informational queries is I try to start a page with a brief summary. And by brief, I mean 1 or 2 sentences. So a lot of times I'll have an H1 formatted heading and I'll have a tagline, a supplemental text. If I have a frequently asked questions page, to get answers to frequent questions about blah, 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 please select one of the links below. That way, if a search engine is going to pick up a snippet from page content, it's going to have something that was well written. The other thing the search engine will get information from is the meta tag description. So even though a meta tag does not matter for relevancy and ranking purposes for a text-based document, it does matter for the display. It definitely matters for informational queries because this could be generated from the meta tag. So things to remember, it's usually around 155 characters. If you write more than 155 characters, it'll probably be truncated. And keep in mind, front loading is important for a meta tag as well. Include important words in the summary and encourage people to click on the link. Don't just say something and not be persuasive. Tell people what you want them to do. Search engines don't use keyword density for ranking reasons. They haven't used this for many, many years. So by repeating a word 3 times in a description, you're actually not making the document rank better. It actually makes it look more like keyword stuffing. And it's very important to a search engine as well as a searcher that there is no duplication. I know it's really, really tempting to write one really good meta tag description and put it across the site. But that actually impedes findability because people can't tell the differences on the pages on your site. If this Google or any other search engine is getting it, the listing description from Open Directory project, for example, you can just put a meta tag on your pages that instructs the search engines. The one at the top gets them all. This one gets Googlebot specifically to not do that. So keep in mind, these are hugely important for click-through because especially if a person's doing an ad hoc search, they are reading those descriptions. So that makes that a lot easier. The least common type of search engine query is a transactional query. And this is a type of query where a person wants to do some sort of web-mediated activity, such as downloading, looking at pictures. I can actually go here. When people want to buy online, they want to download software, they want to listen to music, and I love that digital camera picture because they're ancient now, and watching a video. People use interaction verbs, such as the word download. They can also use a question word. Where can I download? Where can the word question word makes it an informational query. Activity nouns, such as the word picture or pictures, video or videos, and also file extensions. So here's how search engines respond if they believe the person has some transactional intent. They will show you photos and they will also show you videos. So somebody did a search for a band called Little Big Town and they were able to see the different types of videos. So here is an example of a transactional keyword, Sudoku. Sudoku can be played online and as well as offline, and Google has determined that web Sudoku is probably what people mean the most. But let's look at this one. Play Sudoku. Notice that they're using a call to action, and they're also putting play free Sudoku online. So this is a pretty decent title tag, and the snippet is also incredibly important for a transactional query. If you look at the one up here, you see ... and so this content is likely taken from content, and this content here is most likely taken from a meta tag. For a transactional query, it's really important to put action words. Interaction verbs are the activity now. So apply, application, calculate, calculator. It's really important to get these words. And if people use variations of words, so exactly what I did for that particular title tag, I used the word both test and the word quiz in the same item, you're going to want to do that for transactional queries. So Eiffel Tower pictures, single ladies video by Beyonce, download iTunes. These all show transactional intent. So one of the things I'm going to show you is, so I just have to remember what page I'm on page 10, but this is one of the best articles, and I have included this in your bibliography. Bernard Jansen and Amanda Spink have done incredible work on understanding the different intent of web users, web searchers. And what they have done, and I didn't want to reproduce this, is they are giving you definitions and examples of query types. So child labor law, Capital One, buy table clocks. All of these can indicate the query type. And they have also broken these down into items that are far more detailed, and it's just a wonderful article. So I have given that to you as well. Another thing that's available, believe it or not, is a copy of Google Search Quality Guidelines. And they tell you, here's the query, IBM, likely user intent, go to the IBM page. eBay Italian, go to the Italian eBay page. And then it tells you queries with multiple user intents. So download Firefox. People who want to download Firefox might not necessarily want to go directly to the Firefox website. Some of them might, some of them don't. So this is both a navigational and transactional queries. Nikon digital cameras, that's probably starting off as an informational query, and people might want to go to the actual website. So these can really, really help you identify user goals, identify searcher goals. And what I do with these is I make this part of a persona or a profile whenever I'm creating a website. So let's look at some query examples and see. So this is like a pop quiz. Sorry to give you a pop quiz on a Saturday morning. This person wants to buy a GPS for their car. Is this a navigational, informational, transactional query? Multiple, and why? So I actually conducted these queries that I'm showing you are usability tests that I conducted. And what was pretty surprising about this is most people thought that these keywords were transactional because a person is using the word buy. They're also using an abbreviation and they're saying it's for a car. But this actual searcher didn't want to buy the GPS system online. They wanted to buy the GPS system offline because they wanted to look at it. And we see this very commonly on larger ticket items, such as a car, furniture, very common in furniture. So even though on the surface, this seems like a transactional query, this is actually an informational query because the person wants to know where they can buy the GPS for a car. So almost everybody who took this usability test, well over 90% thought this was transactional, when in fact the searcher intent was informational. Free trial of Cook's Illustrated, or a free trial of Cook's Country, or a free trial of recipe site of your choice. Is this navigational, informational, or transactional, and why? What would you think? This is another item that a lot of test participants did not correctly identify because a lot of people thought this was hands down a transactional query because a person wants to get a free trial. Well, here's the thing. In order to get a free trial of something, you have to go to the website in order to get it in most cases. And in this situation, in order to get a free trial of Cook's Illustrated, you had to go to the website. So this is mostly a navigational query. So the word login is a very high indicator of a navigational query. Next one. I'm being facetious about this one because the Oscars are tomorrow. 2015 Oscar winners. Is this a navigational, informational, or transactional query, and why? Well, the fact that it says winners is that it's a plural form of a word, and a person in this case, the Oscars do take place in the United States, so this is a United States searcher. This is pretty much an informational query. A person does not have to go to the official Oscars website in order to get a list of winners. So this, hands down, was an informational query. And here's one that we did actually test, color contrast checker. For those of you who don't know what a color contrast checker is, this is a good site to remember. WebAIM. A lot of mistakes I see in user experience design is that there's not enough color contrast, particularly on a phone. And on a phone, a mobile device, it's really important to make that as easy to read as possible. And this is a really good tool to use to make sure that your foreground color and your background color have high enough contrast. So this is what the search is for. So is this a navigational, informational, or transactional query? And why? This is an example of a transactional query because a person doesn't have to go to a specific website. There are multiple color contrast checkers, as you can see in the search results on Google. But it is something that it typically occurs online, looking at color contrast. So this one was transactional. We tend to see for terms such as games, online games, word games, card games, all those kinds of items. Those tend to be transactional queries. And this is something that Google does, Yahoo does, people who are search engine optimizers, as well as people who manage site search engines, do this and monitor this on a regular basis to make sure they're accommodating searcher goals. So I definitely wanted to leave time for questions. So one of the things, the reason I do this is that I'm really trying to understand the user. I'm trying to understand what their goals are when they go online and that they're trying to find the product, the service, or the information that I'm offering on a website. I want to know what words are important to them. I want to know if there are images that are important to them and videos that are important to them, so that I'm presenting the information in the best file format. I also want to make sure I'm presenting the images in the proper context, and that's where your labeling system is going to come in handy. So we're really looking to understand the user's language. So keyword research tools are wonderful. Auto suggestions here are wonderful. So are related to color contrast checkers. This can tell you what search engines have determined statistically to be the most common keywords. I'm also looking at web analytics data, and I'm also looking at site search engine data. Because if I constantly see a word appearing or phrase appearing over and over again in site search engine data, it's a very strong indication that I have to add content to the website, because this is something that people are expecting to see on the site. So this is an ongoing process. The other thing that's an ongoing process for me is, I'm going to go back to google.com, is I'm constantly going to look for, let's say I'm doing Kent State. So let's just get first of all, I better get the right site. So right here, we got it. Results, and here we go. And we see the evil Wikipedia. So Kent State's doing something right, and it's kent.edu. Well, what if I want to study information architecture at Kent State University? Kent.edu. Is the right page appearing in search results? Based on what I'm seeing, the answer is yes. So you guys totally rock. And by the way, I absolutely love this font, and I find in user testing this works really, really well. So I'm constantly monitoring search results to make sure that the right pages are appearing in search results for navigational queries, because you absolutely have to make it easy for people to get to your site, to the right page. And the last thing is not to assume. I am a website usability professional, user experience professional. Usability testing is just something I do on a regular basis. And the expectancy test is a test that I do regularly. What do you expect to see when I show you this URL? What do you expect to see when I show you a snippet in a search listing? So a lot of times I will just take a snippet. So I'll just take a shot of this, and I will show it to users and ask them, what do you expect to see when you click on this link? And so people expect their information sent to be maintained. So they do expect to see this, the title, the heading, and the subheading, to be reinforced when they land on the page. And search engines are far from perfect. We all know that Google's not perfect. So if we got the wrong page, there should be at least a good navigation system. That's why browsing is incredibly important, to get people to the right page. And then I find once a website does all of this, they don't have problems with Google, they don't have problems with Yahoo or Bing, their site search engine is far more accurate. And the whole reason to do this entire optimization process is for the users, for the user experience. So what I've provided for you is, like I said, this is a really good bibliography. What I would suggest doing is you can get a lot of these online and just go to scholar.google.com and just copy paste it. Boom. There you go. And I am also providing you with a copy of this presentation. So my final thought is please don't stereotype search engine optimizers. I understand that there are the used car salesmen that are search engine optimizers. I understand that there are people that know how to use online tools very well, but they're not very good carpenters. There are good search engine optimizers out there. I know a lot of them personally, and we are not snake oil salespeople. What we're trying to do is to provide context and provide aboutness of your web documents so that they're easy to find. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm in right outside the Chicago area, and I have time for questions if anybody wants to ask them.
So,
and by the way, I hate snakes. I really don't.
So I want to thank you for a great presentation, Sherry. This is Dave Robbins, and let's hear it. And if you do have questions, let me just say that we're going to move everything back 15 minutes because we got started late, and so we have time for questions for about another 10 minutes. And if you have questions, please come up here, and so that you can speak directly into the microphone, so Sherry can hear it, or I can relay it. Either way. Anybody have anything?
It's too early in the morning.
Look at this.
Ask me, I really look like that, guys. Those are my nerd glasses.
Yeah, come on up if you want to. Yeah.
Hi, could you talk a little bit more about internal search within a site and how to optimize for that?
A lot of the things are the same. So I'm going to go to Mayo Clinic. Let's just use flu symptoms. A lot of the things that web search engines use to determine the relevancy of a document are the same things that site search engines use to determine the relevancy of a document. So let me make this bigger for you. So the title, the document title is really, really important. And it's not just important for HTML pages, it's also important for PDFs. So if I go to this one, you can go into document properties and look at the metadata here. It's terrible. So you can actually do this in Acrobat and add this in there. With site search engines, they use page content. So they're using items such as the text documents and headings, the text labels and subheadings. They're also looking at the different types of navigation. And there's primary navigation, secondary navigation, supplemental navigation, as well as utilities. So what are the words you're using to describe content? So learn more is not very descriptive. Learn more what? Like this says complications. So that's the information sent. And just so you know, search engines treat text links here and a fat footer very differently than they treat text links here, because this has more context right here. So, and are you actually using the words in your content? So I'm not saying that you have to use the word every single time, but are you using synonyms? If you're writing about swimming pools, what are the words that are associated with swimming pools? The other thing that I tell people to do is meta tags is something that site search engines definitely use. So if you notice, I don't know if you've heard of meta tag keywords. tag keywords. Well, you'll hear people who are in the SEO industry, this is what it looks like. They tell you Google doesn't read the meta tag keywords. Yahoo doesn't read the meta tag keywords. That may very well be true, but a lot of site search engines use the meta tag keywords for relevancy. So I don't skip this. If I know that a person is going to have a site search engine, I'm going to make sure this list of keywords in this data field is accurate and it's unique. And I don't want to go back and do 10,000 web pages. I'm going to try and put keywords and meta descriptions on a page as I'm doing it. So these are things that's good for Google, that's good for web searchers, is also good for site visitors and site searchers. So believe it or not, I find that over time that when I optimize for Google, the site search engine results get more accurate.
Okay. Other questions?
I want to show you this. This is really funny. You would think the Library of Congress would have a really good site search engine, but they don't. So I actually did a search for what is the capital of ancient Japan. Now I know the answer to that question, but they ended up showing something that has nothing to do with what I'm looking for. And they actually did this a lot better. So I'm glad they did this, but I have a screenshot of where they were directing me to things that had nothing to do with Kyoto. So it's nice to see this. But what I also do, and this is a big tip I do, is I deliberately make mistakes on a website because I want to see how the error handling is for a site search engine. So I will deliberately misspell something, like I did on the Mayo Clinic site. So I deliberately misspelled diabetes to see how they handle it. And look at this, has prompt text. Don't have prompt text here. So that's a misspelling. This is better than the one I just showed you before. This was added in there. Now this was a known misspelling. So this should be far more prominent than this. So that's a mistake too. So do that. Make sure you optimize your documents, but also deliberately make mistakes to see how to do error handling. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I'm a search nerd.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We got another question. Go ahead.
All right, this is not heavily related to optimization per se, but I'm wondering, there is this new trend, and this it's getting heavier and heavier of using voice for search, and also image recognition, even augmented reality, when you can recognize buildings and then search via your camera or search just speaking to your interface. So I know the box is central, but should we start thinking about this? Do you have any particular light that can share with us on that?
Yes. A lot of the things that I just told you are still applicable, because what search engines are looking for is context, because a number without context is just a number. So information without context isn't going to get you the best information. So one of the things I know, Bing has been doing building recognition for many, many years, and I work with people at Bing, and the metadata is extremely important when you're dealing with images, and you're dealing with multimedia files. So don't blow off metadata. How you're linking to that kind of content, how you're connecting that content via your site navigation system. is also going to provide context. So whenever you're creating any kind of documentation to be found, you have to consider that. How are people describing it? Where are people looking for it? Are you giving technology as well as humans supporting information? So a lot of people say keywords are dead. Well, until we stop speaking in words, keywords aren't going to die. And just so you know, one of the lead engineers at Google, his PhD work is in voice technology, and he has done incredible work in audio. So hopefully we'll see this improve. Right now it's still in the earlier stages. Just remember to provide good descriptions and to provide great context, or else it's not going to help. It's going to be more difficult to find the items that you want to be found.
I think we have time for one more. Anybody else? Okay. Sherry, I just want to mention real quick that Amanda Spink was my PhD advisor, and you mentioned her. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of a small world. So anyway, I want to thank Sherry again for a great presentation, and let's hear it for her. Came across pretty well for a remote presentation. So I think now we have time for a 15-minute break. So I guess the stuff is right through the door there, and then we'll get started in the two breakout rooms, 315 and 317, which are down the hall and to the right.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sherry.